Apache Pass, Arizona, February 4th, 1861. As the winter wind whips around him, the legendary Apache warrior Cochise stands atop a hill overlooking the Butterfield stage station. The station has been converted to a fort by U.S. Army Lieutenant George Bascom, as he and his men hunker down in the middle of Apache country, awaiting the Apache's next attack. Down below, the young lieutenant looks up at Cochise atop the hill and feels a sickly pang of fear in his stomach. He knows why Cochise is here. In their confrontation only days earlier, Bascom had attempted to place Cochise under arrest, and while the Apache warrior had managed to escape, Bascom had managed to detain Cochise's wife, his children, his brother, and another Apache warrior. Bascom knows Cochise has returned for his wife and children, but he did not expect Cochise to come alone. Then, to his horror, Bascom realizes that the Apache warrior is not alone. A few feet behind him, tethered by a rawhide rope around his neck, is James Wallace. Wallace, a stagecoach driver who had been with Bascom and his men before being captured by Cochise in an ambush, is virtually bereft of clothing in the freezing Arizona mountain air, and he is clearly terrified. Only weeks earlier, he had been on peaceable terms with Cochise, but now he knows that he will serve as the scapegoat for Cochise's rage if a deal for his release is not struck. His only hope for survival is for Bascom to acquiesce to Cochise's terms and to trade his safe return for the return of the Apache hostages. Cochise now shouts down to Bascom, declaring his terms through interpreter John Ward. Ward is, ironically, the father of the boy Cochise has been falsely accused of having kidnapped. But Cochise has protested his innocence and repeatedly told Bascom that he does not have the boy. He has told them, quite truthfully, that he did not take Felix Ward, that it was likely the neighboring Cayutero who have taken him, and that he is in fact willing to venture to the Cayuteros' homelands in order to barter for Felix Ward's return. Bascom, however, has refused to believe any of this. He again insists that the only way that he will return with Cochise's family and fellow Apache is with the return of the Ward boy. To Wallace's absolute horror, he rejects Cochise's terms for his return. Cochise, notorious amongst his people for having a volatile temper, now stalks off, roughly dragging the terrified Wallace behind him. Back inside their ad hoc fort, Bascom struggles with the difficult decision he has just made. But he feels assured that he has made the correct decision. His orders as an officer are to find the missing boy and to return him to his father. If he relinquishes his hostages now, he will give up his only leverage in negotiations for the return of Felix Ward. He will also sacrifice the only impetus that Cochise has not to attack them. Though he is a graduate of West Point, the 24-year-old Bascom is still inexperienced in frontier warfare, and unaware that the Apache are not known to make large, head-on attacks in the vein of Napoleonic warfare. Thus, he believes that a large Apache attack may come at any time, and that the only way to prevent himself and his men from being completely overrun is to hold on to their hostages until reinforcements can arrive. And, in point of fact, this is the most prudent option for Bascom to take, considering his current position and his training. But his lack of understanding of the nuances of the Apache tribe, of the workings of Apache warfare, and of the nature of Cochise himself, have now put him and his men in an incredibly dangerous position. And they have all but sealed the fate of James Wallace. Cochise now returns to the Chiricahua camp. Fuming, he assembles his warriors and heads out to intercept the 2 incoming stagecoaches that will soon be making their way to the stage station that now houses Bascom and his men. The events of the past 48 hours have, for all intents and purposes, occurred in a vacuum, with the outside world, including the stagecoach teamsters that work for the Butterfield line, having no idea that anything out of the ordinary has occurred here. Now, Cochise and his men seek to cut them off before they reach the station, to loot their cargo, and, most importantly, take every American that they can hostage. Cochise reasons that if Wallace alone is not enough to sway Baskam in negotiating for the return of Cochise's family, perhaps adding in a few more Americans will sweeten the deal. But he faces a dilemma. There are only enough Chiricahua warriors to hold up one target at a time. Cochise will have to decide whether to stage his attack on the eastern or the western entrance of Apache Pass. After a brief consideration, he chooses to first set up an ambush on the eastbound wagon train that has been spotted inside the western entrance. The wagon train, composed of 5 wagons, 9 Mexican teamsters, and 3 American teamsters, is headed for Pinos Altos, New Mexico. They are just over 2 miles from the stage station when Cochise and his warriors attack. The Chiricahua ambush the teamsters, pouncing from behind boulders and brush. For their part, the teamsters are caught completely off guard by the attack. The 3 Americans are apprehended and detained under the watchful eye of Apache guards. After this, Cochise and his men take this opportunity to unleash at least some of their wrath by torturing the remaining Mexican teamsters. The Apache hatred for the Mexican government, its military, and its citizens runs deep throughout nearly every band, from the Coyochero to the Mescalero to the Chiricahua. Their encroachment into Apache lands, their mistreatment of Apache people, and their stealing of Apache livestock has garnered them great animosity amongst the people. Thus, Cochise and his men take great pleasure in tying the unfortunate teamsters to the wheels of their wagons upside down, with their heads hanging down close to the ground. Underneath the unfortunate men's heads, small fires are lit, and the Americans are forced to watch as their cohorts meet a horrific, torturous end at the hands of the Apache. Finally, when the screams of the dying men have faded, Cochise and his warriors return to their camp with these 3 new prisoners in tow. Here, Cochise orders James Wallace to write a letter to Lieutenant Bascom, stating that Cochise now has 4 American prisoners with which to trade for the release of his family. He adds that they will be treated well so long as his family and the other prisoners are treated well. He then takes the letter and ties it to a nearby bush in plain sight of the soldiers who will doubtless come through this area. By most accounts, one of Bascom's men brings the letter to Baskam by nightfall of the same day. But after reading the letter, Lieutenant Bascom is still unmoved. He remains steadfast in his assertion that if he gives up his prisoners now, he will not only lose face with his superiors, he will remove any and all motivation that the Chiricahua have to not simply kill every American still here at the stage station. And, again, considering the training that Baskam has received thus far, this is the correct choice to make. But, again, Baskam fundamentally misunderstands the nature of Apache warfare. Cochise is, indeed, reluctant to attack the stage station that houses the American troops, so long as they hold his friends and family hostage inside. However, this does not limit his options for violence, as Baskam assumes that it does. It, in fact, expands them. If Cochise cannot wreak havoc on Baskam and his men, he will wreak havoc on any surrounding Americans that he can find. He and his men now return to the western entrance of Apache Pass and, in the wee hours of the following morning, intercept the eastbound Butterfield Stagecoach. The stagecoach driver, a Butterfield employee by the name of King Lyons, is the first to spot the burned-out remains of the wagon attack that had occurred the previous afternoon. Then, he spots the smoldering remains of the tortured Mexican teamsters. Horrified, he alerts the conductor, William Buckley, who is seated on the buckboard next to him. Moments after Buckley lays eyes on the scene, the surrounding landscape explodes in a torrent of Apache bullets and arrows, In the initial volley, one of the mules pulling the stage is hit and killed, and King Lyons is wounded. In the midst of continued Apache fire, Buckley now jumps down and cuts the dead mule loose. He then jumps back up on the buckboard and helps the injured Lyons down and into the stage itself. As he does this, the passengers inside the stagecoach begin to unleash their own volley of gunfire. On board is 2nd Lieutenant John Rogers Cook of the 8th Infantry, who pours fire out of the stagecoach window towards the muzzle flashes of the Apache rifles. Across from him, A.B. Culver, brother of the injured teamster Charles Culver, fires his revolver out of the other window. In the midst of this hellacious fight, William Buckley miraculously manages to jump back onto the buckboard, grab the reins, and hurriedly drive the stagecoach the remainder of the way to the stage station. Here, A.B. Culver is reunited with his injured brother Charles, and 2nd Lieutenant John Rogers Cook is able to confer with his fellow officer in Lieutenant John Bascom as to just how they came to be here and as to what they should do next. As the sun begins to rise, it is agreed that their next course of action should be to procure more water for their animals. This treacherous journey to the nearest spring, roughly 1,000 yards away, is a necessary evil for the troops who lead the animals, as it seems every passing second might bring on another Apache ambush. But again, the animals are watered, and the troops return without encountering any Chiricahua. This, to be sure, is a good thing, but it leaves every man at the station, especially Baskam, wondering exactly what the Apaches' motivations were in attacking the stage station but not attacking the water detail. Though they do not know it, Cochise and his men have left Apache Pass, but they have not left for long. Cochise and his men, with their captives in tow, had retreated back to the Chiricahua's main village in order to spirit the women and children south into the Chiricahua Mountains in order to keep them safe from the fighting to come. But they have now put together a plan of attack and are now on their way back to Apache Pass in order to carry it out. At the same time, back at the stage station, Bascom, Cook, and every man present know that they are undoubtedly trapped and that they are in dire need of assistance. It is determined that a rescue party must be sent out into the dark and through the heart of Chiricahua territory. A.B. Culver volunteers to make this trip, as do a number of Army volunteers. Their plan is to travel part of the way as one unit, after which Culver will divert his course to Tucson and the soldiers will continue on to nearby Fort Buchanan. Culver and the soldiers depart in the middle of the night on what must no doubt be a terrifying passage eastward through Apache Pass. But they travel unbothered, for though the Americans do not yet know it, the Apache are now focusing their efforts on positioning themselves for the upcoming attack on the stage station. Though these kind of attacks are by and large not part of Apache's strategy, Cochise and his men plan to use divergence and cunning to overtake the soldiers and then to retake their captives. Their plan is to attack the next morning's water detail and to lure Bascom into sending out reinforcements. And when he does, Cochise and a party of warriors will attack the weakened fort and bring Cochise's family and the remainder of the hostages to safety. Before dawn, the Chiricahua take up their positions, again crouching down behind boulders, trees, and fallen logs. The falling snow also presents another challenge, as the warriors must take care to leave as little trace of their footprints as possible. But the Chiricahua are masters at this, and when dawn finally breaks and Sergeant Robertson again leads a scouting detail outside of the bounds of the station, he and his men find no Apache tracks en route to the nearby spring. Thus, Robinson and his men assume that, like the prior morning, the Apache have chosen not to attack for whatever reason. The sergeant now marches up to the top of a nearby hill and signals back to the men at the stage station that all is clear. Now, Baskam orders the vast majority of their mules and horses, 56 in total, to be sent out to the spring in order to be watered. The animals are then led out to the spring by another small detail of soldiers. But just as they arrive at the spring, the Apache unleash the first phase of their attack. In a scene that is, at this point, not wholly unfamiliar to these soldiers and teamsters, their surroundings suddenly erupt in a cacophony of war cries and gunshots. A force of what later reports will estimate to be around 200 Apache now pour arrows and bullets into the group of roughly 20 soldiers and teamsters. Not long into the attack, Sergeant Robinson is hit in the right leg, the ball entering his leg near the knee and exiting just above his ankle. He hobbles over to a nearby cactus, where, in tremendous pain, he now sits down and continues to fire and reload his weapon. Somehow, though countless bullets manage to just miss him, Robinson manages to mount a staunch defense despite being wounded and unable to stand. Not long after this, the Butterfield stagecoach driver, King Lyons, who had already been injured during Cochise's attack on his stagecoach, is cut down and killed. Seeing all of this unfold, Lieutenant John Cook, the only other officer on hand besides Baskam, and, in point of fact, the ranking officer, leads a rescue party out of the stage station to reinforce the men at the spring. As they head towards their comrades at the spring, the Apache begin to drive the entire herd that they had been watering at the spring into the surrounding hills. There is now a scene of complete, unadulterated chaos unfolding at the site of the spring, and this is exactly what Cochise had planned. Now, Cochise and a group of his warriors charge towards the depleted stage station, intending to overrun Baskam and his men. But it soon seems that Cochise and his men have miscalculated the force of the U.S. Army firepower inside the stage station. The first attack made by Cochise's party is quickly rebuffed, and soon all of the Apache can see that the American position is too strongly entrenched to be overrun. Before long, the warriors creating the distraction at the spring make a retreat, seeing their efforts to be in vain. Cochise and his force that have directly attacked the stage station also soon abandon their pursuit and meld back into the surrounding landscape. Now, Lieutenant Cook, Sergeant Robinson, and the other men at the spring return to the stage station, with the body of the unfortunate King Lyons in tow. But it seems now to Bascom and Cook alike that they have, all things considered, managed to secure some measure of success in driving the Apache away. Now, it seems that Cochise will be forced to the bargaining table and that the Americans hold the resounding upper hand in their negotiations. And this, they assume, means that reaching a deal for the return of Felix Ward and James Wallace will now be the only presumable conclusions to these events. But, again, Bascom and company have failed to fully understand Cochise's perspective on the matter. Bascom imagines that even if Cochise does not have possession of the kidnapped farm boy and Felix Ward, he certainly will not want to further compromise the negotiations for the return of his own family by doing anything to harm James Wallace, who is now his only bargaining chip. While this is, to be sure, a reasonable assumption to make, it does not take into account Cochise's capacity for rage, for inhumanity, and for spectacle. Cochise and his warriors now return to their camp, where James Wallace and the other American prisoners are being held. Here, he and the other Chiricahua summarily torture and then execute and then mutilate every single one of them. The horrific tortures that these Americans had seen carried out on their Mexican comrades were now carried out on the Americans themselves. And doubtless, their knowledge of what is in store adds to their terror. Once this grisly task is finished, The bodies are dumped in a strategic spot, just next to the site of the previous day's wagon train massacre, where they are sure to be discovered by any patrols in the area. But patrols of any kind would be delayed for several days, as the situation back at the stage station continues to develop. On Sunday, sorely needed reinforcements and medical care would come with the arrival of Assistant Sergeant Bernard J.D. Irwin from Dragoon Springs. And, much to Bascom's surprise, they have also brought with them 3 Apache captives, likely Coyotero but possibly Chiricahua, whom Irwin has intercepted and taken prisoner after they were caught driving a herd of stolen cattle northward from Mexico. It is a virtual certainty that these 3 Apache have had no idea at all of the events unfolding here at Apache Pass, but now they find themselves, unfortunately and inextricably involved. But even though Baskam now has 3 additional prisoners to use in negotiating with Cochise, Cochise himself is nowhere to be found. While most of his fellow warriors have returned to their villages after the execution of the captives, Cochise, in all likelihood, has not. He is most likely still somewhere in the surrounding hills, keeping a close eye on the stage station, doing his best to ensure the humane treatment of his captured family. Wherever he is, from whatever vantage point he is watching, Cochise's frustration must continue to grow as he watches greater numbers of reinforcements arrive. Within a few days' time, Lieutenant Isaiah Moore arrives, commanding 70 heavily armed dragoons. After Moore's arrival, he and Baskam begin mounting small-scale patrols throughout the area in attempts to ascertain the whereabouts of Cochise and his warriors. But it will not be until Monday, February 18th, that the bodies of the American hostages will be discovered. The mutilation wrought upon the body of James Wallace in particular is so profound, he is only able to be identified by his gold teeth. When this is reported to Lieutenants Moore, Cook, and Baskam, Moore, the longest tenured lieutenant, and thus now the senior officer in command, orders that the Apache hostages all be brought to the site where the bodies have been discovered and hanged. Though several accounts hold that Baskam in fact argues against this course of action, he is quickly overruled by Lieutenant Moore. Thus, a grim contingent of soldiers and prisoners, including the 3 newly taken Apache captives and Cochise's wife and children, heads back out of the stage station the next morning en route to the execution site. When they arrive, the men are separated from Cochise's wife and children, and Baskam is charged with the unenviable duty of informing them, by way of an army interpreter named Antonio, that they are all to be executed by hanging. With this, a variety of responses pour forth from the condemned prisoners. Some cry out for mercy, some request to be shot instead, and one contentedly accepts his fate, noting with resigned satisfaction that he has killed 2 Mexicans this month and thus is a happy man. They all request at least a swig of whiskey before their earthly departure, but all are soundly refused. In a matter of minutes, the men are all dead. Sergeant Robinson's account of carrying out the execution recalls that the men were, quote, hoisted so high by the infantry that even the wolves could not touch them. Meanwhile, Cochise's wife and children watch on, horrified and undoubtedly assuming that they are to be next. But it has been determined that they are to be taken to nearby Fort Buchanan and released, hopefully to serve as harbingers to their people of what the U.S. Army is capable of should they be crossed. As for Cochise's part, there are conflicting theories as to whether or not he watched the event unfold. Certainly, it is possible, as one of the executed men was his brother, Coyunterra. But his own account, leaves a significant level of ambiguity, recounting that, quote, 6 Indians, one of them my brother, were murdered. Their bodies were hung up and kept there until they were skeletons. As renowned author Terry Mort posits in his book, The Wrath of Cochise, this may indicate that Cochise in fact was not present to witness the executions, as Apache burial customs, extremely important within the tribe, would not allow Cochise to simply let his brother and fellow Apache deteriorate into skeletons if he had been anywhere in the area. In either case, where there had once been a sense of ambivalence and even mutual understanding, a true sense of hatred for the Americans and for the U.S. Army has now been imbued into Cochise and into his people. These events of the past few weeks, known to history as the Baskam affair, will go down as the unofficial but undeniable catalyst that would spark the decades-long, horrifically violent Apache Wars. For Lieutenant Bascom's part, he will never see the full consequences of his actions in Apache Pass, as he will be killed in action against Confederate forces almost exactly 1 year later on February 21st of 1862 at the Battle of Valverde in New Mexico. Cochise will continue to wage war on the Americans, along with other Apache who will go down in history as some of the most formidable native warriors the Army will ever face. Men like the massive, legendary chief Mangus Coloradus, and a younger warrior by the name of He Who Yawns, who will go on to be known as Geronimo. The captured boy, Felix Ward, will go on to live with his captors, the Coyotero Apache, for many years until being returned to the Americans. Ward will go on to work for the U.S. Army as an Apache scout under the name of Mickey Free. He, too, will go on to be one of the most legendary figures in the history of the Old West. But the many tales from the Apache Wars, from the life of Cochise, and from the wild, storied life of Mickey Free are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Thank you for joining us on this episode of History at the OK Corral. Be sure to click the like button, share this episode with a friend, and become a subscriber. Also, if you'd like to support our work and gain early access to episodes as well as ad-free viewing and all that good stuff, you can become a member of this channel by clicking on the subscribe button down below. Also, down below, you will find links to our TikTok, our Instagram, and our daily newsletter. Subscribe to any of them or all of them. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time on History at the OK Corral, home of history's greatest shootouts and showdowns.